I have noticed a disturbing trend in the dog training world fueled by the significant misconceptions about how to create a calm and resilient dog that I want to debunk right now. Let's get started. Being resilient has never been more important. In our chaotic society, we and our dogs are constantly faced with unforeseen, stressful situations. Loud traffic, car rides, social interactions at every street corner, and the pressure to be a good citizen for both human and dogs alike. But what is resilience? How can we achieve it? And are we really leveraging what research tells us? Let's learn something together. The American Psychological Association defines stress resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. That's pretty good. Since we're talking about dogs, I would add to this definition. This adaptation involves maintaining the homeostasis of natural behaviors that are aligned with the dog's genetic predisposition, ensuring they continue to function effectively and exhibit behaviors consistent with their inherent nature. In other words, some dogs just aren't made to be the perfect coffee shop dog. What I will share with you in this video is incredibly powerful, but shouldn't be misused to turn your dog into someone he or she just isn't. Let's have a look at the most common advice you can find from professional organizations on how to foster resilience in dogs. From using management to decrease or eliminate stressors to the resilience rainbow that includes decompression, safety and security, completing the stress cycle, mental and physical well-being, predictability, social support, and agency. You get a plethora of advice. Some of it is great, others a little bit misleading, but I found that the most important element of resilience is being left out and not talked about because it doesn't fit into the narrative of modern dog training, which is the belief that any aversive experience of stress is not ethical. Avoiding stressors is part of management with the goal of avoiding chronic or intense stress that could have negative consequences. For example, too many social interactions for a dog that is very young or shy can lead to anxiety. Being left alone at home for too long can also affect your dog's well-being. So be mindful and avoid recurring stressors that your dog is not equipped to cope with yet. There are really just three main elements of stress resilience, with the third one being the most important one that you want to master. Number one, environmental enrichment. The internet is packed with enrichment ideas, from licking mat to a $15,000 agility park. But just because it mentally occupies your dog doesn't mean it checks the resilience box. The complexity of the environment and changes in the environment that expose your dog to novelty are the two main components of environmental enrichment paradigms. Your dog's motivation to find a hidden toy or treat, maybe even in a new environment, induces the release of dopamine in anticipation of the reward, and endogenous opioids, which put your dog into a content and happy state of mind. Enrichment with rewarding activities that are very natural to your dog, for example, social play, keeps the brain more flexible, not just for better decision making, but also for better impulse control. All very helpful for stress reduction. I personally have a designated day per week where I explore a new neighborhood with my dog to hone into the wonderful neurobiology of curiosity that is immensely rewarding and turn novelty into something my dog enjoys and is not worried about. Number two, physical exercise. Regular exercise increases the level of molecules like BDNF, which keeps the brain flexible and improves cognitive functions. It's just like mental activity, cognitive functions influence impulse control and the ability to override fight or flight reflexes in stressful moments. However, the type of exercise, the duration, and even timing matters. It's not just a walk in the park, but exercise of moderate intensity. Studies usually use treadmill and swimming exercises to increase the heart rate sufficiently. So dust off your running shoes, because that's what it takes to work on resilience. A good game of tuck or fetch before and after stressful events like a vet visit will put your dog in a better state of mind to begin with and provide a good outlet for the frustration of getting poked and pulled by people in white coats. And that brings me to number 3, which is controlled stress inoculation. I find it incredibly fascinating because it taps into an evolutionary conserved mechanism to cope and adapt to stressors that life throws in your face. There's this belief that if you keep your dog below the stress threshold and reinforce calm behavior, your dog learns to be calm in unforeseen stressful situations. Relaxation protocols provide a motivation to offer a behavior that is incompatible with behaviors we see when our dog is stressed, such as pacing, whining, maybe barking. Rewarding a sit or down or eye contact creates an operant condition paradigm we rely on far too often, though. And that is not to say that there is an inherent problem with those protocols. They are valuable tools we use for general enrichment and to train specific duration behaviors like the downstay. However, reinforcing calmness is not the same thing as promoting stress resilience, and that applies to anxiety medication as well. Lowering the arousal level through pills is not the same as fostering a resilient mind. A meta-analysis of research done over the last 20 years on stress resilience is very clear that the controlled activation of the stress response, how the animal reacts to it, and what happens after the event is crucial for building resilience. The exposure to mild stressors strengthens resilience to other stressors through cognitive and behavioral adjustments. Researchers developed a primate model in 2004, where young monkeys were isolated from their social group for a short period of time. Compared to the control group, these monkeys were more exploratory in new environments. They sought out less shelter from their mother and had lower levels of blood stress hormones. In 2015, a mouse model was developed for stress inoculation in the form of exposure to more aggressive mice. As expected, mice showed a significant increase in stress hormones during the stress event, but performed significantly better in resilience tests after compared to control. Today, there are a variety of models from physical restraint to electrical shock to other social stress paradigms, which all have one thing in common. The controlled exposure to mild stress, which the animal would rather avoid, leads to better coping skills in other situations. Two mechanisms are likely to support stress resilience. The stress response is shut off by its own products, the stress hormones. Cortisol has such a bad rap as something you don't want to see elevated, but it's a powerful modulator providing valuable feedback to the brain so that the brain knows it's time to downregulate the stress response. Through controlled stress inoculation, this feedback inhibition is strengthened and leads to a more efficient downregulation. Just like a muscle that grows through fatigue, the feedback mechanism gets stronger through stress exposure. The other mechanism taps into stress relief, which is an appetitive state after the termination of aversive stimuli. Within experiments, aversive stimuli are often physical restraint or foot shocks. The effects of relief right after last only for a few minutes, but this pleasurable sensation of relief can be as intense as that caused by morphine. It is well understood that the activation of dopamine circuits after the experience of stress evokes strong and transient rewarding effects. This very well conserved phenomenon mediates resilience and prevents the development of fallouts such as anxiety, fear, or aggression. The relief effect can be strengthened even more by providing natural rewards shortly after the termination of the stress event. These neurobiological mechanisms allow for the experience of aversive stimuli without lasting fallouts, something we often underestimate. Instead of training consent behavior to give your dog a choice of opting out of nail clipping, being thoughtful about restraining your dog and working through that procedure will make your dog more resilient to future handling. Opting out of it will not. However, in dog training, other factors are essential to make resilience training effective. Robert Sapolsky has emphasized many times before the importance of controllability, predictability, duration, intensity of stress, and can mean the difference between tapping into the neurobiology of resilience or creating more stress with long-term consequences. It's these additional factors, which are often ignored or disregarded from published studies on the effects of aversive training methods. The lack of scientific rigor in these studies has led to a biased narrative against any approach that induces aversive stimuli. As a consequence, we raise dogs that become more susceptible to stress in a world that becomes more and more filled with stress. This is another call to step away from the idea that certain tools cause fear and aggression and tap into the nuances of stress, resilience, and relief, and how this translates into optimal training with or without tools. It is easy to blame a tool or method when it is the lack of knowledge and thoughtfulness that can cause fallouts and unwanted consequences. If you want to see a breakdown of the most cited publications on aversive methods, let me know in the comments. Don't fall for one-dimensional approaches and big pharma promises as a solution to stress-related behaviors such as anxiety. With the right mindset and the willingness to learn the nuances, we can actively help our dogs to navigate through this world with a head held up high. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Melanie, and I'll see you next time.